rural electric needs for an incremental, they basically bought down the price for the residential units, and we were able to provide residential service piggybacking on what money they had to do, extension of fiber for their own use. So, you know, we see a lot of communities, you know, they go out and they invest in their own fiber and stuff like that. So, you know, what we've been trying to convince communities, if you're going for grants to do fiber, stuff like that, we'd love to talk to you. Instead of you becoming a fiber company, you know, we'll partner with you and we'll make our own investment. You know, in this one we did in Butler County, we actually invested almost 3 times as they did. They just simply bought the average cost per door down to an economic level for us.
I have a question. Those grants usually have a time limit, so if we should get a grant, then that would bump us up to be in that time limit, that we have to use that money. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you get a grant, I mean, I don't know what, I've dealt with a couple different grants, but there's a grant to, I mean, you know, we did it for an electric company, City of Fairborn did it for municipal Wi-Fi in the communities. We do a lot of parks. We work for cities to fire up libraries and fire stations and stuff like that as, you know, public Wi-Fi. So as they spend that money and then we drag our fiber into their community, you know, we will look at the opportunities at our own cost to extend fiber to whoever we pass to get to that area.
But my question is, usually a grant, like you have to use it within a year. So if that's the case, will you be able to work with us and get it done in that year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of our work, we just signed a deal with Butler Rural for 2,000 doors. End of January, we'll be delivering doors by the end of this year.
So can you give us a list of possible grants that we might look at?
I don't know the grants that you guys are eligible for. That
Every state's different.
I know the federal grants, but that's about where my knowledge stops, unfortunately.
Thank you, fellas. You know, with time, well, if there's any more questions, you can bring to me and I'll call you Ryan.
Yeah, if you wanna take this one-off discussion, if Main Street is a specific area that you wanna attack, we have no problem coming back out and sitting down with you.
Come here, please.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
sorry, I didn't get to introduce myself before. I talked to you on the phone, but thank you guys.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really
No,
appreciate that.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely leave time. You know, we appreciate being a part of your meeting, so thank you.
Thank you for coming all the way down here, thank you.
These are the areas that we've built and these are the areas that we're planning. So if you have any questions, see where I'm at.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
At this time, we have the first reading of ordinance 283, 2020. It's update to the nuisance ordinance. I need a council that is proposing that ordinance. Is there any council proposing the nuisance ordinance?
Yeah, are you?
Hey Mayor, is this new from, a lot of it's been updated and new from our first original handout many months ago?
Update to the nuisance.
Is there any way tomorrow I can come up and get a full new copy of it? Because there's been changes to it, right?
Joe, you was on that committee. You wanna go ahead and explain?
Well, this actually leads into the discussion that I was wanting to bring up on technology. One of the things I would like, before we jump into it, and Alex just issued this electronically at 2 o'clock this afternoon, something like that. I would like for us, when we revise documents, to use the track changes function, track revisions functionality on Word, Excel, or if we're using Apple products, Pages, or numbers, so that we know where we're at, we know what revisions are being made, just to make it simple. You know, on the, I was gonna try to show you, when we're working with Alex on about a 20-page document, you guys can't see this, but in those 20 pages, well, what revision are you talking about? Where is it at? How do you find it? Whether it's Windows products or Apple products, you can set the track revisions on there. It's a click of a button, and you can see what the edits are, and if it's complicated enough that you want to add a comment that this is the reason for the change, or see Alex about it, or you can do that, and very quickly you can get through with easy understanding. I'd like to see us adopt that practice on documents that we revise, Excel spreadsheets. Oftentimes, we're looking through, and God bless Megan for what you do, but we don't know what line you're on often, or what account we're talking about. we're searching to try to find that, and if it's a revision, if that track changes we're on, boom, we can go right to it. And at the end of the meeting, you can push one button that says accept all changes. You've got a clean, pristine document for the record. It's existing technology. I don't know if it works on QuickBooks.
I don't think it does, but. I
We can
check.
look at that, but that's a practice. Okay, Alex, I don't know, let me see if I can find your email.
This is just the first reading, there's no vote.
Do you have your email in front of us?
You got a committed member.
Why don't you hit the highlights and I'll embellish. We covered 15 to 20 proposed revisions that came out of a document I gave Alex the 5th of December, I think it was. And we had community members and yours truly work with Alex on the document that's being proposed. Those 20 items we discussed, we horse traded, and I think we distilled it down to about 6 revisions that accomplished what they wanted, what I wanted. But you're seeing them for the first, you'll be seeing or hearing them for the first time. So that's the overarching.
Probably the most important addition was the definition of non-conforming. So we added non-conforming language to make sure that everyone in the community realized that if they had a use that was in existence prior to the zoning code or before we enacted the legislation, if they were grandfathered in, we defined that. We took out some definitions of ornamental grass and other cosmetic grasses. There was some discussion about the size of the fire pit and how close it was in proximity to a tree line. We removed that. And we ultimately came up with what we believe to be, based upon the consensus that was reached at this committee meeting, a piece of legislation I think Joe says he can support. And so as far as the tracking changes, I'm happy to do it for every document that I edit. It just, the only downside of tracking changes is when you've got multiple edits, it looks like there was a murder scene. I mean, it's just red everywhere, and there's arrows going everywhere. But I'm happy to do it, send it to you guys. The other thing I could do, which may be sometimes a little more effective, is lawyers, we edit documents all the time, but I could highlight from any given change just that, because if you see all the tracking changes from the 10 different revisions, because I probably have edited this thing a dozen times, it just, you can barely really see. It'll be more complicated than just highlighting the provisions that we changed. So whatever your preference is, I'm happy to do either. But those are the major changes, was just making sure that people were acutely aware of some of these definitional needs, and more importantly, taking out some language that was trigger points for not only the committee but the council.
To embellish what Alex said too, and I just found the email while you're talking, thank you. The definition of the non-conforming use property, also known as grandfathering, I think covers a lot of the concerns we had for older property that might be in an area where the zoning has changed, but that definition should cover and make the residents feel comfortable about, hey, you're not bound to this new one, your grandfather. I think the grandfathering word is important because it's more understandable than what's non-conforming use mean
I agree.
to the non-legal. But anyway, I think that covered a lot of the concerns. One of the other things, Alex, that we included in here was the thing, one of my pet peeves was construction debris and roads, that kind of thing.
Right, we added a definition for construction debris. And essentially, when you get a chance to review it, and it just talks about building materials and construction debris. Joe's position was, and I won't bore you with details, but there's a lot of times where people just leave products in the middle of their yard. They're not finished, they just push them off to the side, and we've defined construction debris. So,
You know, gravel, nails, rebar that gets into the street, that gets into the city, rain, stormwater sewer.
and we spent, Joe, probably about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the meeting. I mean, I think.
That's a state law too, that you can't leave that stuff on the street too.
So that's the stuff that's in there. I don't wanna complicate this, Alex, but can I bring up the part about entering homes?
Sure.
Okay, one thing that we talked about that Alex helped me with my thinking on, I don't wanna put our code enforcement officers at risk. what does that mean? Now, that doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't apply to our new code enforcement officer so much. A couple of police departments, obviously a very capable and able individual, but I think back to Wanda, or I think back to our realtor that was a code enforcement officer. I wouldn't want that person going in solo into an angry homeowner's home by themselves. I think that we need to have a police presence whenever that situation presents itself, which wouldn't be that often, but wouldn't be zero either. There's gonna be circumstances where you're not going inside that home to get a piece of pecan pie in a Starbucks. You're there because there's a problem and there's a potential fine and there's money that an angry homeowner might have to spend to correct a problem. So Alex helped me with what we agreed to, but my understanding of what we agreed to was not to put that in the ordinance, but to basically agree through policy and job description that we're not gonna put our code enforcement officers at risk. And specifically, the only thing I'm thinking of is entering homeowners' homes without a police presence. Maybe you have to get a warrant, maybe we do it out of courtesy, but we have a council mayor kind of gentleman's agreement that we won't intentionally put them at risk. We want them to have a police presence when they go inside.
I agree with you.
So you have to have a warrant to enter their home anyhow legally?
Yeah, but you can get into the same trouble as going up into their yard suggesting.
You have to have some kind of warrant, so I think it is.
I think the sheriff's department would be helpful.
Yeah, the current language though allows Lee to go inside, allows our code enforcement officers going without a police presence. And I don't like that.
I have a question. How do they know in advance that that's a irate homeowner?
I don't think they know. They
So-
may not know the door's shut.
So will the policeman go with them every time? Is that what you're saying?
Only if they're gonna go inside.
Okay, gotcha.
The code enforcement ordinance is designed for the things that you see. I mean, no one is, there are some cities that have done, and it's quite a constitutional issue, but they have done systematic inspections on the interior. And most of they're in cities that have lots of landlords that don't comply, so they're putting their citizenry at risk. So it's a slumlord, and it really was designed to really deal with that. And what they did is, they weren't allowed to discriminate and just say, I don't like this guy's house, so I'm gonna go ahead and send my people in, because you're gonna find code defects. It just is gonna happen. So what happened is that some cities have systematically put it into a grid pattern where everyone that's a landlord has to actually apply for a license. It's a safety issue. And then they go through these regions of the city, all in order. So everybody's treated exactly the same to find code efficiencies. That, we're not even close to that. Everything here is all visual on the outside. So there's no reason, the only time you would ever have an issue where you'd have to go inside is if in fact you had a house like we've had that burnt down and there's holes in the floor. And you might want to put that on the citation, but frankly, you wouldn't even really need to do that because you can cite it from the outside.
Gotcha.
So that's the goal. I mean, the goal is just to put something in place and
But
so-
the ones in the larger cities, when they do their licensing, I think that if I remember right, there's verbiage on the license that the landlord's agreeing
you got it.
that code enforcement has the right to enter the property.
And it was,
Whereas a private citizen, your house or my house, code enforcement person walks up, or that's trespassing.
you got it. So the big issue is that really, the reason legislation was there is because the slumlords were bringing everybody else's property value down. So the people who were really complying with the cities were really wanted a safety issue. In your particular case, you asked a little earlier about what the value of the city does. Well, zoning and code enforcement is pretty darn good, because without it, frankly,
Well, and it brings you back to Crittenden's a heavy base rental neighborhood, so it is something, but again, it's back to what we were talking about a couple meetings ago, is how do you control that? Do you get the landlords to have that license that has that verbiage on it, that gives the city the right to police that the right way?
and what we're trying to do is when a citizen comes and says, look, this car's been parked in the front yard for 6 months and it's broken down on blocks, what can you do about it? So we've looked at it, y'all of course had a chance to look at it. Joe, I know we've spent a considerable amount of time on it. We can make it as brief or as robust as you all want, but I think we found some common this is your legislation now. I mean, you're the one that frankly is taking the reins, and it's Joe's baby. He's corrected it, looked at it, edited, and it's one of those things, and Joe and I, we talked about is, if it doesn't work, we can always,
And I don't mean to keep interrupting, but just as curiosity thing is, would it be worth taking that, and I don't know, you may have already done it as far as your committee and stuff, to get like Brian or somebody to pass that through and say, okay, where's our legal holes here to,
Sure, I think that's a good idea. We're at first reading, right?
I'm just.
You got another?
We can email it to Brian. Would you be
Just, I
willing?
mean, just curious, if you might read a separate set of eyes from your perspective, or, I don't know. Just-
To embellish the point that Alex made here, on an individual standalone home that's on half-acre lot or something, I personally don't care what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
However, if it's an apartment and it's so atrocious that it's endangering a neighbor or other tenants or something like that,
But if you don't dot your i's and cross your t's, that landlord will have enough money to sue the city,
yeah.
because you treated him differently than you treated the homeowner.
That's partially why this legislation is going into effect. The legislation that was on the books prior to really didn't look at due process as a right. It kind of just said whoever is in charge can go around and just cite people and write them up. Well, what's unique about this is it creates an impartial board that's put together by a committee of citizens that this council has nothing to do with. They will make the determination and assess the fine. So due process, that's what it's about. And so if you've got a position, you come and you argue with the board, not these gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, but somebody else. It's never, I mean, it's been on the books for years, we've never actually done it. So trying to clean it up. And honestly, they're not electable. I mean, they're just, I mean, it's tough to find people who want to serve on that board. But it's also very, noteworthy because you really are able to get people to buy in. It's not designed to be punitive. It's designed to help the city grow.
One last comment, I'll shut up. Danny, Todd, or Wayne, you might look at and read that ordinance again. I may have had a blind spot. We both may have had a blind spot and missed something. What did we miss? I think we got a pretty good job, and there was some good input from some of the citizens that, Mayor, you chose to be on that committee, but I don't pretend that it's perfect.
We could, Megan's gonna go ahead and read that first reading.
Ordinance number 283/2020, an ordinance relating to the City of Crittenden nuisance code. Whereas the mayor and the council of the City of Crittenden have the authority to pass such ordinances as it deems necessary to preserve peace and good order and to protect the health, comfort, and convenience of the residents in the municipality. And whereas the mayor and council determined that the residents of the city have a right to an environment that is free from nuisances that may jeopardize their health, general welfare, or property, and as a result adopted chapter 141 nuisance. And whereas the mayor and council have determined that it is in the public's interest to amend the city's nuisance ordinance to clarify that creating or allowing a nuisance is a violation of the city code and to make other clarifying and conforming changes. Section 1, now therefore be it ordained and enacted by the mayor and the council of Crittenden, Kentucky, that chapter nuisance outline be and hereby repealed, reenacted, and amended to the following.
And the council don't have a copy of that, or they need a copy?
I can come tomorrow.
Can you come in the afternoon?
You tell me what time you want me to be here.
Megan, we'll be back.
I can make it during the public session.
Yeah, Megan will make that for you during executive session. Any other council that need a copy of that? Nuisance? Next on the agenda for new business is resolution 256/2020. This is the municipal aid co-op program contract. This was supposed to be taken care of, when was this, back last fall?
You know, we have told us it's due now.
It's due now, so Megan's gonna go ahead and take that.
Resolution 256/2020, Incorporated City of Crittenden, a resolution adopting and approving execution of an municipal aid co-op program contract between the Incorporated City and the Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, the Department of Rural and Municipal Aid for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, as provided in the Kentucky Revised Statute, and accepting all streets referred to therein as being streets which are a part of the incorporated city. Be it resolved by the legislative body of an incorporated city that the legislative body of the incorporated city does hereby accept all streets referred to in said contract as being the city streets which are a part of the incorporated city. And the legislative body of the incorporated city does hereby ratify and adopt all statements, representations, warranties, covenants, and agreements contained in said contract, and does hereby accept the said contract, and by such acceptance agrees to all the terms and conditions therein stated, and the chief executive officer of the said incorporated city is hereby authorized and directed to sign said contract as set forth on behalf of the legislative body, and the city clerk of Crittenden is hereby authorized and directed to certify thereto. So then I have to take a vote on this.
We can do that in the first reading. Is that a resolution? I need a motion for that resolution from.
I'll make a motion.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Question first. Megan, what was our apportionment this last year? Are we above, below, about the same? Do you remember ballpark? This is 79,000,
I think we're about the same.
about the same thing.
Can I make a motion now? Can I make a motion now?
I need a motion.
Okay, can I make a motion now?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion.
Need a second?
I second.
Yes.
Danny,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
Jennifer is absent, Arlene,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paula.
Yes.
Thank you.
As we move on, we have the first reading of ordinance 284/2020, that is the budget amendment.
Ordinance 284/2020, an ordinance relating to the annual budget for the fiscal year 2019-2020. Whereas the city of Crittenden must adopt an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year 2019-2020. It is here ordained by the city council of Crittenden that amends the annual budget for the city of Crittenden for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. Tonight is the first reading.
As we move on, we have the code enforcement officer, Sean Seeger, you wanna come up and give the report?
Good evening. This is the report for February. Currently, there are 6 open cases for nuisance violations, 3 closed cases. There have been 17 letters sent in reference to violations. I handled 8 complaints, 3 walking complaints to the city building, 2 parking complaints, which were referred to the sheriff's office, and 1 extra patrol request in reference to parking on odd hours that was referred to the sheriff's office as well. I had a total of 90 hours in for the month of February, and no overtime.
Any questions by council?
Yes, sir.
If you had to put what you've seen in your first month into buckets or typical, things you've had to deal with, are most of them parking, most of them, what buckets would you put them in?
Probably the biggest nuisance to most people that I've seen so far is gonna be parking issues, and then the issues of, kind of for lack of a better term, eyesores, sitting in front of properties, broken down cars, people working on cars, things of that nature. Right now, it's kind of, I'm premature in the process, I've only been here a month. I've seen, really focusing on neighborhoods, specifically rather than going throughout the entire city, just trying to cover everything and make sure that I'm thorough. Obviously treat everybody the same way.
Your comments are consistent though, and that's what you're seeing the same thing that other folks have saw.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Sean.
Yes, ma'am.
We have at this time Sheriff Brian Mans with the law enforcement report.
So, for the law enforcement report, everybody knows that we're dispatched by the Kentucky State Police. They just, recently, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, rolled out a new CAD system, which is what tracks all the calls. They rolled it out statewide. So they were unable to get us February's report. What they gave me, I think it was the last 2 days of February, the new CAD took effect. There's 38 calls in that. So they assured me that they're gonna have Frankfurt work on February's report, pulling that out of the old system. And I'll get that to Megan as soon as I get that. I've seen the new report. I think you all like it better, the new CAD system. It breaks things down a little different. It can do a lot more. It's a lot better tool for us. It's gonna cost us a little bit of money. We gotta pay $15,000 to get tied on to it, but I think.
Is that yearly?
15,000 initial, and then about $3,300 a year. So, we were paying 800 with the old system. But that's where we're at with that. One thing I do wanna note, I can't go into a huge amount of detail, but about a week and a half ago, there was a roundup in Grant County, 14 federal indictments. 3 or 4 of those people were right here in Crittenden. Again, it's still an ongoing active investigation, but I was told by the strike force that, you know, I could tell that this had happened and it could be bringing more people down with it. It's something that I think I've told you all before. We don't have anybody assigned to the strike force, but if they have something that brings them here, they will come help. And they had something that led them to Grant County. They asked for my blessing to continue to work it. So from October of last year up until last week and a half ago, they worked this case and it resulted in 14 Grant County people going to federal prison. So, or potentially going to federal prison, I should say. Innocent until proven guilty, right, Alex?
That's it, man. That's it. Sheriff, what was the scope?
Mostly methamphetamine, yep. Multitude of drugs, but meth's the big thing.
Sheriff, why do you not have anyone in the strike force?
Money.
They want their cash.
Well,
Manpower.
manpower, I guess is a better way to say that. If we had more money to have more manpower,
I get it.
my goal was once we get to the 15 mark, as far as 15 road deputies, that 16th one, I want it to be a position there. I'd like to have, I think it's a very valuable tool.
You'll draw some attention here, otherwise no representation.
Right, exactly.
And it's here.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what the strike force, that's not the first time they came. You know, occasionally they'll call me, something small, and say, hey, you know, this is tied to somebody in Boone, Kitten, or Campbell. Do you want us to handle it? Well, yeah, because they're the ones in the unmarked cars with all the surveillance tools. We're in marked units. You know, chances are when we pull up, they're gonna quit doing what they're doing. So, any other questions?
No,
Sheriff,
but
is
I
it
have a
just-
favor. Are you gonna be here after executive meeting, cause I wanna talk to
Be
you?
here till the end.
Thank you.
Sheriff, is it the same geographical location that the CAD encompassed before the new one?
That's something, also, I should mention this also, we have a new captain at Post 6. I'm gonna be meeting with him on Thursday. I wanna talk about that. You know, I think I've talked to y'all before about how it wasn't set up correctly, so one thing I wanna fix, it's a brand new system, let's set it up right, let's break the cities down, let's break the county down, you know, so that not only us, but the fire departments can also have better numbers to give to the cities as they respond in and do things.
Thanks,
So that's my goal this week.
thank you.
We lost a good one this week, I see.
We have, Brennan Dills, for those of y'all that know Brennan, he left, started with Boone County yesterday.
Oh, God.
For the love of St. Pete. And we also,
It's a money thing.
it's a money thing, 20 grand. Also had a deputy send me an email yesterday, he's leaving and going to Newport for more money. So we're down 2 more than we were, we've got 3 in the academy, and we're getting ready to get really aggressive with the fiscal court, and I'm thinking and hoping that they're gonna see the light and realize that it's time. And you know, I didn't get up and speak for the council's raise, but Grant County as a whole is behind. I mean, there's no easy way to put that. I've done studies for my own budget and studies that I hope will help you all as a city making a decision on what you all want to do with policing. But if you do it, I want you to do it right, because they can go right up the road and make a whole lot more money, have more backup, more tools, more incentives. You know, the average salary starting for law enforcement is $40,000. Now, when I say average, that's just what it is, because a lot of the agencies, your Boone, your Florence, your Campbell County is now paying up there pretty good. Fort Thomas, it's like a competition. They'll start people out $55,000, $60,000 a year, and you know we're at $33,654 for a deputy.
I have a question.
Dry Ridge, I don't know what they're at. Williamstown, I've been working with their chief. You know, he came to me and said, I know you're doing this work, let's do it together. So I sat down with him. Hey, here's where we need to be. And we don't want to compete against each other. I don't want to take people from Dry Ridge, I don't want to take people from Williamstown, and I don't want them to take them from me. But as a county, I feel like everybody needs to jump on board and stop letting homegrown people go work in northern Kentucky. I want people to say, I want to come to work in Grant County, not I want to go to work in Boone, Kidney, Campbell, Fort Thomas, Covington.
Paula, did you have a question, Paula?
Yeah,
It's okay, I'll talk to you later.
okay. I thought that's what it was about, but
No.
you sure?
Yeah, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
When you talk to the county, you better let them know you're getting ready to lose some more to that point.
Oh, I know, I've had meetings with the guys, and they've told me, look, no hard feelings, but if we can get a better raise, better benefits. I mean, part of the problem with the county is benefits. You know, those that have families. Yeah, those that have single plans, they're just getting paid for, but when you put your kids on your health care, or your wife, or your whole family, I pay $900 a month. That's what I pay. $900 a month. Now, think about making $33,654
You got 4 or 5 kids, that's
a year,
horrendous.
and $900 a month comes out of that. So,
It's state police as well, I mean, they're losing.
yeah, I just read an article today, and a couple of the troopers, we got in a conversation about it. It's a nationwide thing, really, but the state police, I mean, they're at 40,000, they're losing guys at post 6. You never heard of troopers leaving the state police when I started.
No.
The state police is where you planted your feet and you stayed for your entire career. Now they're going to Erlanger, all these little agencies. I mean, it's time for Grant County. We're growing. You know, we got a council and a mayor here ready to move forward, so it's time for the whole county to move forward. And we have a lot
That's
of-
also true for our educators.
Absolutely, educators can walk right up to northern Kentucky
are.
or Scott County and get a $12,000 to $15,000 raise.
Someone left Williamstown, went to Boone County, and her salary was increased enormously.
What you have to keep in mind too is that for law enforcement officers with experience, that's a huge pay incentive. Once you get 5 years on the road, that bumps your salary another 10 grand.
Right here, I screenshotted this, Florence Police. 2 years experience, $53,500.
Yeah.
3 to 4 years experience, $54,752. 5 to 6 years experience, $57,244. 7 or more years experience, $58,532.
And that doesn't count Clough.
That does not count trainings. They're putting out these flashy flyers all over social media,
Annie, you coming out of retirement?
County's hiring too, man, they're.
They want the
big bucks,
laterals
too.
because they don't have to pay the
They
training
don't have
costs.
to pay the training, and that's the trouble.
You're paying the training costs for them because they just snag them as soon as they can.
They'll buy you out in a heartbeat.
Thank you, Sharon.
No
Appreciate
problem.
it.
Thank you all.
This time we have the law enforcement report, or excuse me, the fire department report, Chief Weaver.
How do you follow that?
With a song.
Like Sheriff said, and he's got some good people. They work very closely with the fire department. We rely upon the deputy squad bid on some of these scenes for